This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. The coolest thing about working in an empty office is that I can work on ASMR videos without my boss knowing. In today's show, the president says he's not going to help the US Postal Service as it struggles to get things sorted ahead of an election that'll likely lean heavy on mail-in voting. Plus, renewed scrutiny over Kamala Harris's record on criminal justice. But first, our top stories. New numbers continue to show the US still struggling to get a grip on the coronavirus. Wednesday marked the deadliest day for the virus since May, with more than 1,500 coronavirus-related deaths. Daily new case numbers seem to be declining, but health experts warn that nationwide testing has fallen too. For the first time since March, jobless claims fell below 1 million, but just barely. The Labor Department reported 963,000 people filed for first-time unemployment last week. Claims have been steadily dropping since they peaked back in March, but economic experts say we are still worse off than we were during the Great Recession. A total of 15.5 million people are currently collecting unemployment insurance as congressional Democrats clash with the president, making little to no progress on stimulus talks.
Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi are holding the American people hostage over money for their radical left-wing agenda.
We'll come down $1 trillion if you go up $1 trillion. We'll meet you halfway.
Californians might soon have a little trouble getting an Uber or Lyft. In a win for rideshare drivers, a judge ruled drivers must be classified as employees, not contractors. That's a big deal because it means drivers would qualify for things like healthcare, pension, and workers' compensation. Now, both ride-sharing companies say if that's the case, they will need to temporarily shut down. Lyft and Uber both have a week to repeal the ruling. If that isn't granted, Uber will likely shut down until November, when California voters will get a chance to decide on a ballot measure weighing whether rideshare drivers are employees of the companies they drive for. 2020 has been a year already, but don't forget there's still more to look forward to, like choosing who will be president in November. With coronavirus complicating the voting process, a record number of people are expected to send in their ballots by mail. But the United States Postal Service is struggling right now, and President Trump says they won't be getting any help from him. Newsy's Sasha Ingber explains.
Now, they need that money in order to have the post office work so it can take all of these millions and millions of ballots.
President Donald Trump wants to block funding for the U.S. Postal Service to curtail mail-in voting. He's attacking House Democrats for including $25 billion in funding for the agency in their latest coronavirus recovery bill.
If we don't make a deal, that means they don't get the money. That means they can't have universal mail-in voting. They just can't have it.
His comments Thursday morning came amid concerns that his administration is intentionally harming the Postal Service, months before people begin to rely on the mail to vote.
The main changes we've seen in the last few weeks by the new Postmaster General have been policies that actually slow down and delay mail.
Mark Dimenstein is president of the American Postal Workers Union, which represents more than 200,000 employees and retirees of the Postal Service. He says changes started in mid-July, without the union knowing beforehand. Under a new Postmaster General, the agency began cutting workers' overtime hours, reducing retail hours at local post offices, and limiting equipment that sorts mail. Now it's reorganizing and freezing management hiring. Dimenstein says President Trump's agenda is looming large.
We are concerned because this administration has a very clear political agenda in terms of undermining and degrading the Postal Service. And now, unfortunately, trying to convince the people of the country that somehow mail-in voting is fraudulent and corrupt when all the facts show just the opposite.
The president began falsely attacking mail-in voting months ago, but his criticism of the Postal Service dates back years, recommending it be privatized in 2018. But he has praised the new Postmaster General, Louis DeJoy, a major Republican donor who started in June.
As you will soon discover, I am direct and decisive, and I don't mince words. And when I see problems, I work to solve them.
Democratic lawmakers question whether White House and Treasury Department officials inappropriately pressed board members who are Trump appointees for his selection. Together with his wife, DeJoy reportedly holds tens of millions of dollars in assets of competitors to the USPS. DeJoy recently denied that he was slowing down the mail or making decisions at the direction of the president. The Postal Service declined an interview, but a spokesperson told Newsy they face an impending liquidity crisis. The former Postmaster General estimated the agency could run out of money by the fall. Even before the overhaul started in July, an audit found delays and tracking problems with mailed ballots in Wisconsin's primary election in April. It also identified, quote, potential nationwide issues for future elections, like the window of time states allow voters to request mail-in ballots.
These deadlines sometimes do not provide enough time for the election office to generate the ballot, present it to the Postal Service, and for the Postal Service to sort and deliver that ballot before an election.
A Newsy analysis found that during the pandemic, as thousands of mail carriers quarantined, not a single region across the country met USPS's annual targets for first-class mail to be delivered on time, a trend that has continued since last year. Sasha Ingber, Newsy, Washington.
Bad news, I've spent way too much time on Twitter this week. The good news, I'm gonna get paid for it when we're back.
I did not think it would be this difficult for me to obtain a medical abortion.
Why can't you pick this pill up in a pharmacy? It has real risks for the mom.
It's a bureaucracy.
I felt like nobody was going to be able to help me.
Miss getting email that isn't junk? You should know about Newsy's daily newsletter. It's breaking news right to your inbox. Get caught up quick with the best Newsy stories every day. Join us at signup.newsy.com. Be informed, not influenced.
The bubble is expanding. And no, we're not talking about the Oscar-snubbed Annihilation bubble. We're talking about the NBA bubble. Here's what's trending. The league now says it'll allow players to invite guests into the closed-off complex where the basketball season has been playing out over the past few weeks. While other pro sports leagues have struggled with COVID outbreaks and canceled games, the NBA's bubble has been a pretty clear-cut success with 0 positive tests for the virus from the 342 players tested in the past week, with both family and friends who have, quote, long-standing relationships with players entering the mix. There are obviously some concerns that the bubble could soon be compromised, but for the most part, players say they're looking forward to seeing their family and friends, which, yeah, that makes sense. Businessman and former presidential candidate Herman Cain died a couple of weeks ago from complications due to COVID-19, but that hasn't stopped his social media pages from sounding off against Kamala Harris and the Democratic ticket. Some folks have been a little thrown off by what appear to be tweets from the grave, but Cain's daughter says she's the one operating the accounts, pledging to continue her father's work in spreading a conservative, pro-Trump message. Save the Children is trending, and because this is 2020 and we live in a dark timeline, it's trending for some pretty messed up reasons. Basically, the Save the Children hashtag for years has been used to support the global charity focused on providing education and healthcare for children around the world. But in recent weeks, across social media, that hashtag has been dominated by theories around human trafficking rings, driven in large part by the right-wing conspiracy group QAnon. Q is a loosely organized network that believes a lot of things, including that President Trump is secretly working against a ring of Satan-worshipping pedophiles operating in the US government. Now that network is just flooding the Save the Children hashtag with unfounded and often clearly false rumors about a shadowy network of human traffickers. So yeah, just a reminder, check your sources and maybe just let charity hashtags be left for, charities. Aside from the squabbling over Kamala Harris's heritage, yes, she's Black American and Asian American, her being selected as Biden's running mate has also renewed scrutiny over her record on crime, something more liberal voters have taken issue with. Newsy's Jamal Andrus takes a closer look.
Kamala Harris' time as a prosecutor, first for San Francisco, then for the entire state of California, is full of contradictions, from her stance on the death penalty to her views on mass incarceration to how to address police-involved shootings. Harris was the first Black woman to be elected district attorney in California's history, one of many firsts. She campaigned on being progressive, competent, and promised to raise the conviction rate in her district. And she did. During Harris's first 3 years in office, San Francisco's conviction rate rose from 52 to 67%. She pushed for jail time rather than probation for crimes like robbery and home burglary. One of her most controversial tough on crime decisions came in the form of an anti-truancy policy.
And I believe a child going without an education is tantamount to a crime. So I decided I was going to start prosecuting parents for truancy. Well, this was a little controversial in San Francisco.
Harris's office spearheaded an effort to criminally prosecute parents whose children repeatedly skipped school. The program led to a 33% increase in student attendance during her tenure and the prosecution of just 25 cases, though none of those parents saw any jail time. Today, Harris says she regrets the policy.
So what went wrong with that versus what you did as DA?
Absolutely. Unintended consequences, to be frank. When I was DA, we never sent a parent to jail. In some jurisdictions, DAs have criminalized the parents.
Right.
And I regret that that has happened.
On the other hand, Harris created a criminal justice program that was well ahead of its time. The Back on Track program cleared the record of first-time low-level drug offenders by enrolling them in a year-long diversion program. While the program successfully served a relatively small number of people, about 308 years, it did drastically cut the recidivism rate of its graduates. Less than 10% of Back on Track graduates returned to prison or jail within 2 years of release, compared to 53% of those who didn't complete the program.
On the issue of the death penalty, I am personally opposed to the death penalty. I've always been opposed to the death penalty, and that's not going to change.
Harris's commitment to opposing the death penalty was challenged very early in her career when a police officer was killed by a gang member in her district. She did not seek the death penalty despite pressure from local and state officials. But later, as Attorney General, she appealed a federal judge's decision that California's death penalty was unconstitutional. She said while she was against capital punishment personally, she felt her position required her to defend state laws. But what may be the biggest change from her time as a prosecutor to now is public opinion. The percentage of Americans who say the justice system is not tough enough shrank from 70% in 2000 to 45% in 2016. Among Democrats, that number is even lower. We've seen similar changes in America's views on the death penalty and criminal justice reform. So despite the barrage of criticism Harris has received about her time as a prosecutor, in many cases her policies were not out of place for the time she served. Jamal Andrus, Newsy, Chicago.
That concludes today's ITL campaign coverage. With 81 days until the election, we don't want to burn out too soon. When we're back, we'll tell you about a film you might want to add to your Netflix queue this weekend. Excited that you found Newsy's clear, straightforward news reporting? Just remember, you can come back every morning for fresh, up-to-date stories and get your day started with news that matters most to you. On your schedule, anytime you need us, every day. All facts, no opinion. We're Newsy. Be informed, not influenced. This weekend, Netflix will release a sci-fi movie starring Jamie Foxx, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and Dominique Fishback that involves people taking a pill and gaining superpowers. There is a Netflix and pill joke in here somewhere. But the film also blends elements of the superhero genre with issues related to racial justice, something that's been front and center over the last few months. Newsy's Casey Mendoza has more.
Power, power, speak a little louder.
Project Power is Netflix's latest superhero action flick, and it hopes to fill this year's void of summer blockbusters. Newsy got the chance to speak to writer Mattson Tomlin about his film.
So it was kind of this genre mash of I started thinking, what are movies that I really love? And if you just drop superpowers into them, like, what is that? And the first thing that came to mind for me was 8 Mile, which is one of my favorite movies.
Like 8 Mile, Project Power takes its cues from hip-hop and touches on class and race struggles in the US. With heavy tones of realism, Mattson's film adds to the growing subgenre of darker, grittier superhero franchises like Netflix's Luke Cage, Amazon's The Boys, or HBO's Watchmen.
No, Batman and Robin, that's a movie. This is real life.
We doing this.
But unlike those titles, the film doesn't focus on superheroes. In fact, superheroes don't really exist at all, and superpowers come from a dangerous drug. Without giving anything away, the genre is more of a backdrop. for real-life issues like police corruption and racial justice, issues that were especially salient to Tomlin when he first started developing the story.
You know, at the time that I started writing, Ferguson had not been that long ago. The system that we live in is super broken, and that it felt like the kind of thing that was worth making a movie about.
You're young, you're black, you're a woman. The system is designed to swallow you whole.
The film stars actress Dominique Fishback in the role of Robin, making it one of the few titles in the genre with a black woman in the lead role.
That wasn't my social justice prerogative. It was kind of like, that to me was the story that felt worth telling.
Just 3 out of 10 lead actors in film are people of color, according to UCLA's 2020 Hollywood Diversity Report. And of last year's top movies, black actresses made up just 5% of film roles in general. In the superhero genre specifically, representation is growing, especially after the critical success of Marvel's Black Panther and HBO's Watchmen.
Hello, Detective Angela, right?
Watchmen was recently nominated for 26 Emmy Awards, including Best Lead Actress in a Limited Series for Regina King.
There's a little bit of privilege that I can use here, like the fact that I am this straight white guy. There's an opportunity for me to tell this story in this way that can hopefully make it so that now there will be more of those movies with more leads that look like Robin looks like.
Project Power debuts Friday, August 14th on Netflix. Casey Mendoza, Newsy, Chicago.
If I could take a pill and gain a superpower, I'd want the ability to sear this hashtag into your brains. Just kidding, it'd be flight, but still, hit us up.
Sure. Memes and cat videos are fun, but actual news might be a bit more useful. Follow Newsy on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get straightforward, opinion-free news right on your social news feed.
Today is Thursday, just in case it's been a little tough to keep track of where we are, but it's also August 13th, which is Black Women's Equal Pay Day, a day highlighting the pay discrepancies between white men and black women. Newsy's Kat Sandoval breaks down that discrepancy and how the coronavirus pandemic has exacerbated that gap.
8 months. That's how much longer a black woman has to work to make the same amount of money as a white man. August 13th marks that day, the Black Women's Equal Pay Day. On average, a black woman makes 62 cents for every dollar paid to a white non-Hispanic man, which means she had to work an additional 8 months to earn what a white man made in a year.
That wage gap for black women has not budged for almost a quarter century.
That pay gap adds up. Over a 40-year career, a black woman could lose an average of $900,000 compared to a white man, and that pay gap can be especially difficult to bear in a pandemic. Jocelyn Fry is an expert on pay equity.
What we know about the pandemic is that there's been a tremendous amount of job loss for women generally, black women specifically. They work in a lot of jobs that have been deemed essential. So on the one hand, they're essential jobs, but they're low-paid jobs.
According to the Center for American Progress, from February 2020 to July 2020, black women saw the largest employment population ratio drop compared to other women. Not only have black women experienced tremendous job loss in this pandemic, but about 2/3 of black mothers are the primary breadwinners in their families.
So all of those things together have really exacerbated the economic stability of, and worsened the economic stability of black women. And so when we talk about equal pay, we really have to think about strategies that will not only remedy the immediate problem, but also into the future.
Experts we spoke to say solutions include passing the $15 minimum wage bill that will lift low-wage workers' salaries. They said companies can start by being transparent about their wage gap, even making it public, and getting rid of that salary history.
Asking for salary history in the hiring process, in the interview process, that forces women and women of color in particular to carry pay gaps with them throughout their careers.
How can black women better navigate these pay inequities?
It is true that there is
a gap with pay. However, you can overcome that gap. There are women out there every day who are negotiating, who are asking for more, who are getting higher titles, who are getting higher pay.
Dorian St. Fleur says employers are interested in hiring more Black women.
Folks are seeking Black women out. They are saying, I would like to understand how I can hire more Black women. I would like to understand what I can do to be an ally, to change my hiring process, to change my performance review process, et cetera. So I think this is a unique time that we're in right now where we can use that to our advantage.
Kat Sandoval, Newsy.
Yesterday, we mentioned that Marjorie Taylor Greene won the Republican primary for a U.S. House seat in Georgia. That win got some play partly because of Greene's support of QAnon, a loose network of conspiracy theories. And Greene isn't the only QAnon supporter who has won a congressional race this cycle. Newsy's Stephanie Liebergen has more.
So I want to tell you guys, the fake news media, the DC swamp, the political establishment tried to take me out. But there's definitely more of us than there is of them.
Marjorie Taylor Greene's Republican runoff win Tuesday makes her the latest QAnon-linked candidate to make it to the November ballot. The far-right conspiracy group has made headlines this year as supporters have run, and in some cases won, congressional races around the country. QAnon believers are part of an online community that believes there's a so-called deep state tied to sex trafficking that is conspiring against President Trump. They identify themselves with slogans and pledges, and they follow the anonymous online leader Q. The liberal-leaning group Media Matters for America has identified 20 candidates who've qualified for the November ballot and have supported QAnon theories or used their hashtags or phrases on social media. 19 of the 20 candidates are Republicans.
So the Republican Party is going to have to deal with this. I mean, when some of these candidates will get to Congress, some of them may repudiate their association with QAnon. The one in Georgia might not.
Some of the candidates have attracted the attention of the country's top Republican, President Trump.
Given that Trump is president and he supports this rhetoric, he continually retweets it and his family retweets this stuff. If you are a QAnon supporter, you might be looking around saying, this is my time.
Joseph Uzinski is an associate professor of political science at the University of Miami. He suggests that some politicians who've been linked with QAnon aren't necessarily diehard believers.
Politicians sometimes say things they don't really believe just to get people to vote for them. And that's the same, whether they're saying things that are true or saying things that are false.
Other candidates, like Republican Jo Ray Perkins, who's running for the U.S. Senate seat in Oregon, have come out as true supporters. But Uzinski says the early success of candidates like her isn't necessarily representative of the voters in their districts.
I would not extrapolate from something that a candidate says or some link that they might have to what everyone who voted for them believes. Those are different things.
Stephanie Liebergen, Newsy, Miami.
That's it for us, gang. Do something nice for yourself this weekend and feel free to tell me all about it next week. I'm going off the grid for the next 72 hours, but we'll have more In the Loop Monday, same time, same place. Top stories from Newsy are headed your way right now.